Welcome to the Eye of Horus Productions, The Devil's Throne on Earth. Bow down before me and take your place beyond now. I shall never bow down to you or anyone. I should be the number one. I said bow down before me. If you won't bow down, I shall condemn you to the earth. So shall it be. I shall take the angels with me to the earth then. During the next equinox, I shall let them decide if they want to stay in heaven or fall into defiance. You shall have your wish, so shall it be.
We were saying how very important it is to bring about in the human mind the radical revolution. The crisis is a crisis in consciousness, a crisis that cannot anymore accept the old norms, the old patterns, the ancient traditions. And considering what the world is now, with all the misery, conflict, destructive brutality, aggression, and so on, man is still as he was. He's still brutal, violent, aggressive, acquisitive, competitive, and he has built a society along these lines.
Let it be known that I shall set up my throne here on earth, as 1/3 of heaven shall reign with me on earth. I shall make none of you bow down before me. My name on earth is Zeus, and my kingdom is strong in darkness. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Revelation 2:12. And to the angel of the church in Pergamos writes, These things saith he which hath the sharp sword with two edges. Revelation 2:13. I know thy works, and I know where thou dwelleth, even where Satan's seat is, and thou hold fast my name, and hath not denied my faith, even in those days where Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth. Today, the main sites of ancient Pergamon are to the northwest of the modern city of Bergama in Turkey. Some ancient authors regarded it as a colony of Arcadians, but the various origin stories all belong to legend. The Greek historians reconstructed a complete history for it due to the confusion with the distant Titania. It became the capital of the kingdom of Pergamon during the Hellenistic period under the Attalid dynasty, 281 to 133 BC. Pergamon is cited in the book of Revelation as one of the 7 churches of Asia. Pergamon reached the height of its greatness under Roman imperial rule and was home to about 200,000 inhabitants. The library of Pergamon was renowned and second only to the Library of Alexandria, although not approaching Alexandria in scholarship. The city was an early seat of Christianity by the 2nd century. Pergamon is mentioned in the book of Revelation as a dwelling place of Satan and the location of his throne, and that an early bishop named Antipas was martyred there. The city suffered badly during the 3rd century and was badly damaged by an earthquake in 262 and was sacked by Goths shortly after. Anatolia was invaded by the Persian Sassanid Empire in c. 620 after the Persians were driven out by Byzantine forces. Pergamon was rebuilt on a much smaller scale by Emperor Constans II. Zeus is the king of the Olympians and god of the sky, weather, thunderstorms, lightning bolts, winds, and clouds. He is also the god of law and order, justice, human fate, and human race. Zeus is called the father of the gods and king of all. His symbol are the thunderbolt, eagle, bull, and oak. In addition to his Indo-European inheritance, the classic Daniel A. Swisher also derives certain iconic traits from the cultures of the ancient Near East, such as the throne of Satan is also an altar for making sacrifices or offerings to a deity. An altar requires a sacrifice or burnt offerings. The throne of Zeus, it was an altar of burnt offerings. They would take a victim, place him inside the bull, and then they would tie him in such a way that his head would go into the bull first. Then they would light a huge fire under the bull, and as the fire heated the bronze, the person inside the bull would slowly begin to roast to death. As the victim would begin to moan and cry out in pain, his cries would echo through the pipes of the head of the bull, so it seemed to make the bull come alive. Even in the midst of the flames, the elder bishop Antipas died praying for his church. The year was AD 92. Europa was initially a Cretan moon goddess who was incorporated into the Greek mythology as a virgin Phoenician princess. She was the daughter of King Agenor, or Sidon, and Europe was named after her. She had an affair with Zeus, which Hera never learned about, and therefore never tried to pursue Europa to punish her. One night, Europa dreamed of the two continents which had taken forms of women arguing over her. Asia maintained that since Europea had been born in Asia, she belongs to her. The other continent, which was nameless, said that her birth was not important and that Zeus would give Europa to her. Disturbed by the dream, Europa woke up and in the early hours did not go back to sleep. She summoned for her companions, who were all daughters of nobility and of her age. It was a beautiful day, and they went off gathering flowers by the sea. Zeus noticed the charming group, particularly Europea, who was the prettiest of the maidens. According to some of the sources, Eros induced him into action with one of his arrows. Although Zeus never really needed much persuasion, in any case Zeus appeared to the groups in a form of a white bull, one that was more beautiful than any other, a bull that smelled of flowers and lowed beautifully, a bull so obviously gentle that all the maidens rushed to stroke it and pet it. The bull laid down in front of Europea and she slid into its back. Instantly, the bull charged off, plunging into the sea, and began to swim rapidly from the shore. Europea saw a procession had joined them. Nereids riding dolphins, Triton blowing his horn, even Poseidon. From this, she realized that the bull must be a god, and she pleaded to pity her. Zeus spoke to her and explained his love. He took her to Crete, where he had been raised, and promised her that she would bear him many famous sons. Her sons included Minos and Rhadamanthus. A Jewish proverb, where the law of God is not taught, there Satan dwelleth. Ancient Pergamon was at the center of pagan worship in Asia Minor, once known as the place where Satan dwelleth. In the 1st century, it was a thriving city, but after countless wars and natural disasters, the temple of Pergamon lay in ruins. By the mid-19th century, the once great city of Pergamon was barely a memory. Locals used this site as a quarry, looting the marble for new buildings until 1864, when a German engineer paid a visit to Pergamon. Karl Hamann was shocked by the destruction of the priceless artifacts, so he got permission to excavate the ancient city himself. What he found was one of the greatest monuments in ancient history, the altar of Zeus. Stone by stone, the altar was excavated and taken to Berlin, where it was reassembled and placed in its own museum. The Pergamon Museum opened in 1930. With the altar at its centerpiece, eventually the altar caught the eye of a young man named Albert Speer, the new chief architect for the Nazi Party. Germany's new chancellor, Adolf Hitler,
Die große Zeit ist jetzt angebrochen. Deutschland ist nun erwacht. Die Macht haben wir nun in Deutschland gewonnen. Und die
commissioned him to design the parade grounds for the party rallies in Nuremberg. For inspiration, Speer turned to the Pergamon altar. If you read the German written by Speer, he gives all the credit to Hitler, says Dr. Anthony R. Santoro, the distinguished professor of history and president emeritus of Christopher Newport University. I think he's like a good interior decorator that someone hires that client already has ideas of what he wants to do, and the decorator agrees with him. So that's what Speer did. Using the altar as a model, Speer created a colossal grandstand at the rally grounds in Nuremberg. It became known as the Zeppelin Tribute. After the war, only a small part of it was left standing. If you look at the kinds of ceremonies that were on display at Zeppelin's field with the reconstructed temple there patterned on the Pergamon altar, you see photographs of Hitler descending down on the steps like a tribute of the people from old Rome times, says Santoro. In the middle of the grandstand where the bronze altar of Zeus stood in ancient Pergamon, Albert Speer built Hitler's podium. Hitler wanted to create what he called a mass experience, and Speer came up with the perfect idea. Most of the Nuremberg rallies were held at night, so Speer surrounded the grandstand with 150 searchlights. The columns of the lights extended for miles in the sky, creating a mystical effect Hitler wanted. The concluding meetings in Nuremberg must have been exactly as solemnly and ceremonially performed as a service of the Catholic Church. This effect was known as the Cathedral of Light, and it became a hallmark of Hitler's events. It was even used in the closing ceremonies of the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin. While it's very expensive way of creating interest, says Santoro. Hitler is very much aware of German mythology. His favorite entertainment is German opera, certainly Wagner and all the mythological stories that go with Wagner. And certainly any time you're looking at mythology and gods, you are looking skyward. So I don't think it's an accident that he says to Speer, let's create an environment of looking towards the heavens. And that's what it does. Inside the rally grounds, thousands of Nazi Party members marched in torchlight parades. These events happened at night, which gives a contrasting effect of fear, of strength, of the unknown, of mystery, and that's all intended by Hitler, says Santoro. He's very theatrical. Torchlight and fire have always been part of the German mythology. I think there's a quasi-mystical, semi-religious content to these torch parades. There are many of them in Nazi Germany. From his podium, Hitler mesmerized the crowds. Not every one of you sees me, and I do not see every one of you, but I feel you, and you feel me. The Cathedral of Light, thousands of Germans swore that they called the Holy Oath. Blazing flames hold us together into eternity. No one shall take this faith from those who are dedicated to Germany. From 1933 to 1938, hundreds and thousands of people gathered at the Zeppelin field in Nuremberg every September for the Reichspartag, or Nazi Party Congress. But it was the 1934 rally that captured the attention of the world, thanks to what may be the greatest propaganda film of all time, the 1934 party film Triumph of the Will, which was released in 1935, is the consummate picture of Hitler, says Santoro. No other film was ever made of Hitler, and he didn't want any other film made of him. Everything that he wanted people to know about the Nazis is in that film. It was shown continuously for 12 years in Germany. Triumph of the Will It was directed by a young German actress named Leni Riefenstahl. She was a famous movie star. I would characterize her as the female Indiana Jones, says Santoro. She was pretty and shapely and popular and romantic. Hitler's a bit of a romantic, and so he liked her. The film portrayed Hitler as a godlike figure and the savior of the German people. Hitler's entrance to the film is from the sky like a messiah who would be descending down through the heavens, through the clouds to the faithful wanting for him bellow, says Santoro. Anytime he appears, any people who are close to him have these starry-eyed looks, almost these gaze looks, as if they're in the presence of an unearthly being that's intentional. In his speeches, Hitler often borrowed Christian phrases, like in the one scene with Hitler Youth after they sing their song to him, "Hail Hitler to Thee," which is almost like a religious chant. He goes into his speech and he says things like, "You are the flesh of our flesh, the blood of our blood," where he borrows that from the Roman Catholic ritual with which he's very familiar. It's a very physical statement and it resonates with the crowd. Hitler's popularity skyrocketed after the release of The Triumph of the Will. The next year, more than 1 million Germans came to Nuremberg to hear his speech. On the evening of September 15th, 1935, Hitler announced the Nuremberg Laws. The law for the protection of the German blood and German honor is intended to begin the marginalization process of the Jewish people, says Santoro. Hitler had a lot of popular support for much of his time in office. One doesn't get popular support by saying to the public, we're going to put the Jewish people in gas chambers and incinerate them. What he did was gradually marginalize them. It was also in Nuremberg that Hitler used the phrase final solution. For the first time in public, bitter complaints have come in from countless places citing the provocative behavior of the Jews. This law is an attempt to find a legislative solution. If this attempt fails, it will be necessary to transfer the Jewish problem to the National Socialist Party for the final solution. The Nuremberg laws stripped the Jews of their rights as citizens. They couldn't teach in public universities. They couldn't practice medicine in public hospitals, says Santoro. They couldn't fly the national flag, but they could fly the Jewish flag. Then that was coupled with the right citizenship law, which said that Jewish people in Germany were subjects of the Reich, but not citizens. Hitler's final solution is known as the Holocaust, a word that comes from the Greek meaning a holy burnt animal sacrifice. In AD 92, the faithful martyrs Antipas died, a holy burnt sacrifice on the altar of Zeus in Pergamon, the place of the book of Revelations calls the throne of Satan.
Thanks for listening to another podcast by the Robert Stogner Show. Hope you enjoyed it. See you again soon.